Good morning, everyone. It's so good to see all of you guys. Go ahead and stand to your feet. Come on, let's worship together. Hey. Come on, if you know the words of these songs, let's sing it out.
Surely it was true. Since when has impossible ever stopped you? Friday's disappointment, Sunday's empty too. Since when has impossible ever stopped you? Come on. This is the sound of dry bones rattling. This is the praise, make a dead man walk again. Open the grave, I'm coming now. I'm gonna live again. This is the sound of dry bones rattling.
Fun times. Hey, well, if you guys didn't know, Jessica and I just found out yesterday as we were walking, the Old Town Music Festival thing is going on, right? So we knew that was a thing, and then we forgot about it. We saw the stage, and we're like, oh man, something crazy cool is happening over there. We don't know what it is. Not knowing that right in front of us was this big sign that said, Old Town Music Festival. Like, if this sign just wasn't here, we would know what was going on back there. It's just hiding exactly what we're trying to figure out. But playing at that was, we had Paul, our bass player here, Paul Jones, and Devin also. They both were at that. I actually asked Paul during rehearsal, I was like, I heard Garth Brooks' Rodeo.
Ooh, I love that
from my house. I heard it.
That's my favorite.
I heard it from my house. And I was
Garth.
like, who is playing Rodeo? And then I asked Paul. He was like, yeah, that was us.
So good.
Exactly.
Yes.
Oh, my gosh.
Can we do that song?
Yeah, let's do that next. Y'all cool with that? Let's do it. No, I'm just kidding. All right, Megan, we're about to sing this next song.
Yes.
You're leading us in this next song.
Love
That
this
had
song.
nothing to do with anything, by the way. I just want to let y'all know that was an event that happened.
That's good.
We're singing this next song. Tell us a little bit about this next song and kind of in theme of what we're talking about today.
I just absolutely love just kind of this song and the way that it's kind of just, you know, there's so many different names to God and different seasons that we kind of know God in different ways. And I just love this part because it's kind of just like that shelter that we run to, the shelter in the storm, and just like the anchor. And I just feel like there's so much just crazy sometimes going on out there. And I love just coming back to this song, coming back to the heart of God and just knowing like I can hide in you, I can be safe in you, and I can have peace in you.
Yeah, not seeing God as kind of like this angry, you know, judgmental, whatever.
Absolutely.
But seeing him as
a comforter.
Exactly.
Someone
yeah.
who loves unconditionally.
All right, so we're going to sing this song out. Let's sing this song together. Come on.
Let the king of my heart be the mountain where I run, the fountain I drink from. Oh, he is my song. And let the king of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life. Oh, he is my song. 'Cause you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Let the king of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, he is my soul. Let the king of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, he is my soul. The king of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, he is my soul. Let the king of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, he is my soul. You are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good.
You're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me
Sing this out, church. Come on.
down. You're never gonna let me down.
Sing it.
You're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down.
guys may be seated.
All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Rancho. My name is Alex. I'm one of the pastors here. Just stoked to be here with you this morning, whether you're in this building or whether you are online. We see you. We're just happy to be here and happy to be singing together. Band, that was incredible. You guys are awesome. Let's give them a huge hand. They lead us every week in such amazing worship. If it's your first time here, I want to make it super easy. You can text the word new to 951-379-3795. We'll text you right back. We'll give you a form that you can fill out and kind of get you started on your journey, answer questions, anything like that. Also, if you want to talk to a human, we love talking with you. We have a welcome center right outside. We have a gift for you, and we would love to see you. If you ever forget anything, if you're confused, if you want to hear about an event and you forgot the date or the time, you can email us at info@rancho.tv. We check that email all the time. We love to get your emails, and we love to respond to you, so please email us there. And then if you would like to give, you can give at rancho.tv/giving. There's easy directions there on how you can set up recurring giving, or you can text to give, or you could just give one time if you'd like to. And when you give, it goes to support the ministry that happens right here in the walls of this building. It goes to support the ministry that happens in our community. And then it goes all throughout the world in our different global outreach ministries that we participate in. So you are participating in advancing the cause of Christ all over the place. But one of the ways that you advance the cause of Christ when you give is you get to give the next generation an opportunity to hear a message that God loves them, that they are incredibly valuable, and that God has an incredible plan and purpose for their life. And they do that through coming to our youth ministries and our youth camps. In fact, I want to show you a quick video right now, and then the youth are going to take over Wagar. So get ready and check out this video.
That was 2 years ago. We did not get to go last year. We're so excited we get to go this year. Good morning, everybody. I am here. My name is Megan, and this is Delaney, and this is David. And they are our youth leaders, our faithful youth leaders. How long have you been leading?
Since 6 years, 7 years with youth.
6 or 7 years. How long have you been leading?
About 5 years.
That's awesome. Yeah. And they are also in our young adults group. And so we just want to quickly shout out, if you are a young adult, if you identify as a young adult, if you are in college, because I for sure do, and I don't want to hear about it. So that's too loud. But if you want to come, we're actually meeting at my house tonight. We're going to have a gathering. We're going to have food and games and all that stuff. So shout out if you're a young adult, email me, and I'll give you the address to my house. Anyway, so they are our youth leaders as well, which I'm super lucky that I get to work with you guys. But we just want to tell you a little bit about camp. We're so excited about camp. We didn't get to go last year. And so if you guys don't know, we actually put on our whole entire, our own camp. We do the messages, we do the worship, we do the games, we do all that stuff. David, tell us a little bit about your favorite camp memory, either from when you were a camper or when you were a leader.
Well, I've definitely been a part of the Rancho youth movement of some kind since my kiddos were in 6th grade. They're going to be in juniors now. And I've been a part of that long, been a part of so many camps and experiences. And Escape Camp is honestly my favorite experience that we have for our youth ministry, because our kiddos get to go up at Palomar Mountains. They get to have a ton of fun up in the mountains and do all sorts of activities that you hear about. But I think what's an amazing experience is that we have students that come up that are not always believers, that are not always sure in their faith, and they get to get loved on by leaders who are closer to their age, leaders like ourselves, who get to just show them love of Christ. And I think my favorite memories that we have is the last night of camp, where we have a giant bonfire under the stars with very little lights, and they get to actually talk about their experiences at camp. They get to get up and say what their favorite memory was. And I remember hearing one of my kiddos just getting up at camp in front of everyone as one of the big dogs on campus and getting to say that he got to reaffirm his faith at camp and that he got to really experience the love of God.
I love it. They'll come up and they'll be all like, oh, I'm so cool and I'm here to show off and I'm whatever. And then by the end, they're just like, I love Jesus. And they're just crying.
everywhere.
Yeah. It's the best.
Yeah, I love that too. That's probably my favorite night of camp all around. But Palomar Conference Center has amazing things that we get to experience there as well. They have zip line, ropes course, they have archery, they have a giant pool, as you could see in that video. I don't know if you caught it, but I definitely got flipped out at the end too. Really good times.
Can't wait
but
to
we
do that
also, we have some amazing games planned for you. Incredible worship, meaningful messages. And I'm telling you right now, I went to camp and I had made friends there, and they are still some of my best friends today. So it's just a really good experience.
That's right. It's amazing. And like David was saying, he's been with his guys leading them from the time they were in 6th grade, and my son gets to have the privilege of being led by you from 6th grade all the way up until now they're juniors in high school.
Insane.
And you
I'm
cannot,
not ready for
you
this.
just can't put a price on that. That is amazing. But speaking of price, so we need you. That was a good segue.
That was a really good segue.
So it does cost. We do have a cost. We do this with like a lot of our volunteers and our ministry staff to really truly keep the cost down. I think most camps now are about $600, and our camp is $385 per camper. So if you have a middle schooler or a high schooler, we want to encourage you to sign them up for camp. But also, if you guys are in a position where you can give, we have about 15 right now that have requested financial assistance, that have said, I would love to go to camp, but my family and I right now, just through the pandemic or whatever, they've hit hard times and they just can't afford it. So if you want to give towards one of those students, and you can pay for an entire student, you can sponsor them, or you can give $100. If 4 people give $100, that's 1 student that gets to go. You can do that. You can sign up at rancho.tv/Wagar, or you can also find the giving link there as well. Yeah, and we're super excited. And speaking of camp, we have Scott and Steve that are coming up here right now to give the message, but you guys are coming to camp with us.
We are. I'm going to run games.
Yes, you are going to be the game master.
And Steve's going to actually be a camp counselor.
Steve
so
is
that's
going to be
great.
in a cabin with the student.
You guys all better be nice
Better
to me
man.
for the next few weeks.
That's so amazing.
These guys were in my youth group
Yep,
back
they
in
were.
the day, and now they're leading the youth
That
group.
I know,
It's
it's so
kinda
crazy. So
awesome.
we're
Not
super
Megan.
excited
She's
to have you guys.
Megan's way too old to have been
Shut
in
up,
my youth
I'm
group.
not.
But the
I'm an
others
adult.
do.
The others, yes.
How you doing, man?
Well, thank you guys. Appreciate it. Camp's going to be great. And I'm excited to be up there with you. You're going to actually have a cabin full of guys.
Yeah, I'm hoping it's guys, and I'm hoping it's high school guys. I'm very nervous here. They asked
gonna
me,
be
and I
great.
said yes, and now I don't know what I did.
Well, you're going to
I
find
did
out.
20 years. How many years did you do? We did
Same.
camps together.
Yeah, I
Man,
started the Escape.
One year, remember we did that
Back
one
in
camp,
forever.
like you, Sabo, Ryan Sharp,
yeah, that was
we
fun.
all did a camp together.
did
So
a
we
joint
were in
camp.
youth ministry together. I was at another church in town, and we did a lot of things together. So fun times.
Speaking of fun times,
This is going to be a fun time.
I don't even really know what's going to happen here, but here's the deal. We've got a lot. Steve and I have talked about this subject a lot. And we could probably be up here for 3 weeks straight.
Yeah.
And we just might. We'll see how today
Yeah,
goes.
let's just do it. I got nothing going on until camp,
That's
which is
true.
in August.
We're going through this summer series called Reimagine. And we're walking with Jesus as he's reimagining the world as it could be and should be. And we've talked about Jesus reimagining humanity, reimagining priorities, reimagining values, reimagining purpose. Last week we talked about Jesus reimagining community as he calls the 12 together. Right. But this is the big one.
Yeah.
Jesus reimagines God. Jesus reimagines God. And just saying that is
Seems
like,
wrong.
Wow, it seems wrong.
Yeah,
What do you mean reimagine God? We've always believed God is this, and we've always thought God is this. And so when Jesus came into the Hebrew culture, they had a deeply ingrained view of God based on the law. They perceived God as judging us according to the law. But Jesus says, you know what? I think you got it wrong.
Yeah.
That's a tough one. Why is it so important, Steve, that we believe, I don't just want to say believe the right things about God, but when it comes to basically our approach to God, why is that one of the most important things we can do in life?
Oh, my goodness. I mean, it's a hard thing to answer, but Dallas Willard said something I've always loved, where he says, like, our main connection with God is in our minds. And it affects our minds. When you think about the Bible, it talks about our minds, and it talks about renewing our mind and redirecting our minds. Even when it talks about repentance as a changing of the mind. When it talks about being regenerated or by being redeemed, it's about, I believe, having a clear picture of God, a better picture of God. And I think that just how we see God affects us. Okay, as Christians, we're called to be more like God. So however it is we imagine God, I think it subconsciously and consciously drives the way we see ourselves, the way we see others. I mean, I can't help but think, like, I think it was A.W. Tozer said that how we picture God is the most important thing about ourselves. Right. And so, and I think that's because it affects us more. Every one of us here have a way we imagine God that affects how you look at your spouse, how you look at your kids, how you look at your neighbor, how you look at your enemy, all those things. So I just think it's the most important, one of the most important things, you know.
So Tozer himself did say, what comes in our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about us. And just as you said, and you think through that and you're thinking, well, is it really the most important thing? What we think about God, is that the most important thing? And the more I wrestled with this, the more I agree with you, and the more I agree with Tozer that yes, it's the most important thing, because what we believe about God shapes our worldview. It's almost the very definition of our worldview. In fact, if you did a little bit of a scanning of the cultures of the world, and I know this is a whole big task, follow the cultures of the world, who they are culturally is who they believe God to be. Yeah. So if God, in their minds, is vengeful, and is vengeful in a violent way, the culture probably leans towards being more violent and vengeful.
Right.
And I know we can look out there, but I'm not sure we need to look out there for that.
I think we always need to look outside of our own culture.
Exactly right. Totally. So if how we perceive God impacts an awful lot of how we live life. So for example, if God is, say, focused on the community. So in many cultures of the world, God is not really focused on the individual as much as the community. So they're a more communal society. Western Christianity perceives God as focused more on the individual, a personal relationship with God. Right. And so our society is very much focused on the individual.
Well, and then we're blessed. When we're blessed, it's God that blesses us.
Right, yeah.
And I think that drives us a lot. I always get taken back to the Bible when Jesus was saying it's harder for a rich man to fit through an eye of a needle. And then his disciples are just tripped out, right? Like, well, then who can make it in if a rich man can't? And I think we, not only in that violence thing, but when it comes to wealth, when it comes to prosperity, it's hard to not be focused on prosperity and God and thinking that we're the blessed. I mean, I feel blessed to be an American, to live in this country and being born where I'm born, to be able to have the privileges and the pursuits that we can have. And so when we tie that to God, now we begin to elevate ourselves above others. And it's a changing that way of thinking is very difficult.
All right, so let's talk about changing what we believe, what we believe about God. We've talked about why it is so important, or why it's so critical to believe about God. I think correctly, and we'll talk about that a little bit. I struggle with that. I know you do as well.
Yeah, we're going to give you guys so many answers. You're going to leave here just we got all the answers.
Figure it all out.
You'll probably leave more confused today than you came.
So our belief about God is, we're going to just confuse each other. The belief about God is the most important thing in life, arguably. Yet it is so difficult, if not impossible, to actually change what we believe about God. And I know you've done a lot of reading about this. I've done a lot of reading about this, but what we see in Scripture, particularly in the life and ministry of Jesus, is Jesus is asking us to change what we believe about God.
Yes.
And he runs into a buzzsaw here to the point where he gets killed because of this, right? He's asking the people around him to believe something different about God. Yet it is so difficult to do that. It's not just something our brains can say, oh yeah, I used to believe this about God, now I believe that about God.
Yeah.
Why is it so difficult?
You know, because I don't think we can change our belief by a force of will. I was reading a book, we've been talking about this. I don't think, just imagine, right now, you're sitting next to your spouse or your child, and you believe you love them. Okay, for the next 10 minutes, I want you to stop believing that. Stop believing that you love your spouse. Stop believing that you're in this room. Belief is not something that we can just forcefully change. Now, growing up, I think we're forced to say we believe things, and over again, we're warned if you don't believe this about God or that about it. Any of you guys ever grow up with warnings? Scared to change that belief, so you take little kids and you warn them, I think, and so they're having such a bad attitude. Ever say that to your kids? The next day, okay, cool, I won't anymore. So belief is just not something that you can change by the act of your will, and that's in so many different ways. Okay, now we come to God, where for many of us, we're raised in America, we're raised Christian, we're raised in Sunday school class, we're raised in this idea of be careful, God's watching you, he sees everything you do. That gets ingrained in us for years and years and years. And I think it's one of the hardest things to change. And then if you do change anything, you remember the fear. Right. because I was told in certain things. Like I remember the first guy that said, like, if you ever don't believe in a literal 6-day creation, you're on a slippery slope to not believing anything. And I remember I'm like going like, I don't think I already believe in a literal 6-day. And I remember that fear as I journeyed on that. Hugh Ross was a big part of my life. And Hugh Ross is this astrophysicist who's been here a few times, who starts talking about the earth being millions or billions of years old. And the first thing in the back of my head is, oh no, this makes sense. Oh no, I'm in a dangerous place with God, because he's all focused on what I believe, and if I don't believe right, then he's not going to accept me. And man, it's been a journey. And it's still right, then he's not going to accept me. And man, it's been a journey. And it still is.
It's a paradigm that's built in, like you said, from the youngest ages.
Yes.
It's a paradigm that God is your judge, that God is watching your behavior, God is watching your doctrine, what you believe.
Oh, gosh. That's worse than behavior.
Yeah,
to me, it's worse than... I've always been a goody two-shoes.
Right.
Any goody two-shoes out there? Like, never wanted to do things bad. I wasn't even raised going to church. Yeah, I should try. Oh, I've tried. I hang around with you enough. But, you know, and so being a goody two-shoes, to me, it was the thought that was the scariest part for me, not the actions. Right. And so, yeah. Sorry to interrupt that.
No, that's all right. We grew up with this paradigm that God is watching what you believe, and you better get it right. God is watching how you live, and you better get it right. So the whole paradigm for a lot of us is that God is judge. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like there's these trees that are rooted in your head. There's this neuroscientist, right? We talked that every time when you're young, a thought is implanted in your brain. It's like a tree that takes root. Yeah. And so when we grow up in a religious environment, this is what's right. Yeah. There's a tree planted. This is what's wrong. There's a tree planted. This is what you should do. This is what you shouldn't do. And so all these trees are planted from the time we're about 8 years old to the time we're in our young 20s. So from 8 to about 22, that's the formative years, right? This is when our brain goes from mush to congealing. And during that time, whatever we're taught about God, it becomes this forest that's deeply rooted in our brain. And then somebody like Jesus comes along and says, oh no, change it all. Yeah. So here he's talking to the Jewish people. 1,400 years of believing that God is judge. Right. Here's the law. Here's what's right to believe. Here's what's right to do. Here's the consequences if you don't do it. Jesus comes along and says, that 1,400-year tradition of believing God is judge is not right. He's actually Father. That's why he was crucified. Yeah. It is so hard to believe that. You can't just turn that out. You can't just unroot thousands of trees that's been planted in your head about what to believe about God. And Jesus plants one seed that God is actually not your vengeful judge. He's your loving Father. He planted one seed in the brain of humankind and was crucified for doing it. And so it is difficult. And I'm telling you, we experienced that here at Rancho. In my own life, I had a grace awakening where I had to unroot thousands of trees in my head and plant the seed that God is actually a loving, gracious Heavenly Father and not a brooding judge. And then to walk a whole church through that process, it is difficult.
Well, and I mean, come on, I've been raised in church. There's always grace and love. Right. But it was that idea that you can't know the good stuff until you know the bad stuff. Yeah. And so the bad stuff took forefront. So it's like this idea, I remember, this idea is like, love God because he loves you, but if you don't, beware, right? So you're like, how does this work? Yeah. You know, it was like the bad stuff. I mean, what kind of love is that? If I was that kind of dad, what would that be like? But that was ingrained. I mean, those exact words. You can't know the good news until you know the bad news. What's the bad news? God is going to just blow you up.
So, and here, I got this email this week. Somebody visited last week. I won't mention names. That'd be bad.
Hope they're not here this week. They came back.
I don't know. I don't think they came back.
Thanks for
Pastor.
for encouraging us.
Get back to your roots. Preach the good news, which includes the bad and the ugly. There's much to be done in these last days. Here's the warning. I'm sure you desire to hear the words, well done, good and faithful servant. Threats and warnings and warnings. Yeah. When people hear the idea that God is a loving, gracious Father and not a judge, they panic. Yeah. Because they've been raised from the time they were young to believe that God is judge. He wants us to do the right thing and believe the right thing. And if we do the right thing, if we believe the right thing, then we're fine with him. If we're not, we could be condemned, even eternally condemned. Yeah. To make that switch, to uproot those thousands of trees, to plant the seed of grace is, but by the grace of God, impossible.
Yeah. I mean, when you talk about the renewing of the mind, the transformation of the mind, it talks about an outward, like something from the outside, like the Spirit of God that needs to change to see God in a different way. And you're the one that talked so much over the years about like so much of the warnings you see is warning religious people. It was really warning those, and we're going to talk about this in a few weeks, so come back, you know, but it was warning those that were making God seem far away and hard to get to.
Right.
Those are the ones that Jesus went after. Those that felt far from God, he's like saying, I'm right here, right? I'm right here. Those that were making people feel far from God, follow the rules, buy our stuff. I mean, there's a lot of history of money and commerce and power. I mean, any of you with your kids, you're losing control of your kids, and all of a sudden the idea is like, well, God's watching you, like, right? It's like, that's what I go to when I'm losing control. God's watching you, you know. Now they're all panicked. Good God, they're going to be good now. So, man, it has been ingrained, and that affects, again, it affects a lot.
It does.
And
It affects everything.
I mean, when we look at the judgment that we cast upon each other, I'm reading a book right now on Rwanda. I mean, that was Christians. You guys know that, right? That was Christians killing Christians. That was Christians that were in the same church one week, slaughtering each other the next week. Yeah. You got to think of God as judge to do that.
Exactly.
Your focus can't be on love to think that's something that God would do. And the history of the church is that way. Now we're throwing political bombs at each other. Right. We still have this, you know, God's on our side. God wipes anyone out that's not on his side. And it's still affecting us.
And it's still very present here today.
Yeah. In my own heart and mind, it's present. And it's hard to
It's a lifelong journey
that.
to walk from this paradigm of God as judge to God as Father. Listen to 1 John 3:1, and we'll wrap it up here. See how very much our Father loves us. It's a New Living Translation. It's this invitation to just see something different.
Yeah.
Because people only see God as judge, which means I'm living in some kind of fear. I have to perform for God or I'll be judged. And we're also judging others, right? Because we now have the authority. If God is our judge and we're on his side, I can judge others. We want to see something different. See how very much our Father loves us, for he calls us his children, and that is what we are. But the people who belong to this world don't recognize that we are God's children because they don't know him. It's just about belief. See something different. Recognize something different. Don't see God as vengeful judge anymore. As hard as that is, it's been rooted, thousands of trees rooted in your brain. Believe something, see something different. He is actually our Father.
Yeah. I mean, I heard the message last service. You know, I just want to encourage you, or even you online, as you listen to what Scott's going to be talking about, as those other trees start lighting up. Take a deep breath. Search out the scriptures. Listen. You know, it is a beautiful message. When Jesus says the good news, peace on earth, it is good news to all people. I commend you and your boldness in that. And I know for some of you, you're going to hear that and kind of go, yeah, but that's okay. It's hard. It's hard, this journey. And we're still on it. We get the opportunity to talk about this all the time. So, but the freedom that comes with it, oh man, just to not feel like God's just arms crossed and waiting for me to whatever. And then what that creates to be able to really see others in a different way. It's the freedom, I think, this Bible says we're free into, loving others as Christ has loved us, laying our lives down for others as he's laid aside. I think this love has to be the center. Yeah. And I read one little thing where it says God is love. The Bible does not say God is forgiveness even though he is forgiving, or that God is knowledge even though he's all-knowing, or that God is power even though he's all-powerful. All other attributes are like facets on a diamond, radiant windows in the heart of God. But with regard to love, God does not merely act it out, he embodies it.
Yeah. And that's really literally embodied in Jesus. We're going to sing a song here. Evan, this is a song, it's one of our favorites. It's called The Goodness of God. And there's a line in here that we're going to just camp on. It's the line that says, I know you as a father and I know you as a friend. And that is the heart of this message. That's the heart of the goodness of God. It's the heart of loving God, that we don't have to see him anymore as vengeful judge.
Right.
We can see him as father and friend.
Right. And the line, I mean, the line right after that says, I've known you as a father and I've known you as a friend, and I have lived in the goodness of God. Yeah. It's that knowing, like you said, that relationship that you have with God, that knowing that he's a father and a friend, that helps you live in that fullness of being an actual, or living in the fullness of the goodness of God.
Yeah. So, yep.
Awesome.
Lead on. Thanks, man.
rather wake up until I lay my head. Oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am made, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire, and in darkest nights, you are close like no other. I've known you as a father, I've known you as a friend, and I have lived in the goodness of God. Yeah. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am made, oh, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God. Come on, stand and worship with us. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I'm surrendered now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I'm surrendered now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. All my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am made, oh, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God. I'm gonna sing, I'm gonna sing. And all my life you have been faithful. Yeah. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God.
You may be seated. Like Steve said earlier, when we grow up in church, we might hear a lot about God's grace, we might hear a lot about God's goodness, we might hear a lot about God's love. But then there's some nagging things that just keep getting poured in. And they're poured in by well-intentioned people who want us to behave. They want us to believe the right thing. And I would say even one step further, they want us to kind of, quote, be saved. Now, if you were raised in kind of church in the 80s and 90s, maybe a little in the 2000s, you understand what this means, right? There's such a drive to have people, quote, be saved. And the thought is, we're saved when we satisfy the judge. And so the judge is satisfied when we believe the right things about God. So you've got to believe the right things about God. Believe the right things about God, then you'll be saved. But then your behavior's got to kind of match your beliefs. So you've got to do the right things to satisfy the judge. So we want people to be saved. So here's what you are supposed to believe. Here's how you're supposed to live. If you believe this and live this, you'll satisfy the judge and be saved. If you don't believe this and don't live this, you won't satisfy the judge and you'll be condemned. But God's a God of love and grace. Let's sing about love and grace and goodness. It's a weird kind of message. And I'm just telling you, my experience growing up, I know, is the normal experience of people growing up in church, especially, let's say, 40 years old and older. Here's what I was told by people who loved me and cared for me and walked with me and were there for me during very difficult times of life. But here's what I was told, and some of you this might resonate with you. Some of this are the trees that are planted in your brain. I was told that God demands death for my sin. I was told that in junior high, that my sin so offends God that someone must die. I was told that. I was told that God not only demands death because of my sin, but God demands the shedding of blood. It can't just be a death. It's got to be a death by the shedding of blood. That's what I was told God required. I was told Jesus was killed because I deserved to be killed because of my sin. This is the normal church experience from youth group on. I was told that God will come back and destroy all unbelievers with fire. I was told God will condemn unbelievers to eternal bodily torture. I was told that God will only hear my prayer if I first confess my sin and repented of my sin. So if I sin against God, I am separated from God and I have to confess and repent of the sin in order for God to hear my prayer. I was told if I keep on sinning, I could lose my salvation and be eternally condemned. I was told if God wanted to bless my life, if I wanted God to bless my life, I have to pray regularly, read the Bible regularly, obey his commandments, go to church, give money, volunteer, and share my faith. I was told that in 7th grade. I was told that my sin separated me from God, even the impure thoughts in my head. And so there were very few times, no joke, I actually felt close to God. And usually that's because I behaved for a certain period of time and felt I deserved it. I was told that in order to be saved from eternal torment, I had to believe the right doctrines about God. I had to get the answers right. I was told that God would punish me if I sinned by making sure things didn't go right in my life. That was his way of, quote, disciplining me. I was told God was a judge by well-intended and good people who loved me deeply. Do some of these things resonate? Can you relate with some of these things? And I can guarantee if somebody didn't teach you this, you probably think this because that's human nature. Human nature is, I'm not good and God must be good, therefore there's a separation. So whether you were explicitly taught these things or whether they're just sort of fears in the wondering of your mind, right? Things that might be, that God might be holy and good and separate and other than, and I am not good, and so something must be wrong. He must be disappointed with me. He must be judging me, and perhaps that judgment will happen in this life, and perhaps that judgment will happen in the next life. We're taught these things. In fact, there was a very famous, very popular image in the 80s about who God is that I'm telling you was emblazoned in my head. This is one of the trees firmly rooted in my brain, and that was it. That's God. A giant, white, faceless judge pointing and condemning. In fact, part of these images that were very popular in the 80s is that next to the judgment seat is this big screen where everything you've ever done in your life is going to be shown to everybody. Remember some of that stuff? I see so many heads nodding right now, it's scary. That's what happens when we believe God is a vengeful judge. It's all about the law and the rules. And when we disobey the law, there is condemnation. When we obey the law, obey the rules, there is judgment. That's just what a judge does. This giant, white, faceless judge. And then what ends up happening is, let's say, we get to a point of some confidence. I'm confident now I believe the right things. And I'm confident now that my lifestyle is the right kind of lifestyle. If God is judge and I'm with him, I can and should be a judge also. Now I can start judging everybody else. I'm with him. I'm with the judge. Now, I'm a little deputy judge, and I can start judging everybody else's way of thinking and judging everybody else's doctrine and judging everybody else's lifestyle, right? I'm with the judge. I'm right. Welcome to Church in America. But Jesus came to reimagine the whole thing. Jesus came to take all the thousands of trees that are rooted in our brains about what we think about God, and he came to uproot it all and plant a little seed. Jesus came to reimagine God himself, to free us from believing God as a vengeful judge and free us to believe God as a loving Father. Whole different paradigm, whole different way of looking at God. As Steve and I talked about earlier, and it's not just a switch. It's not just something you can say, okay, well, I was born and raised from kid to young 20s believing God is judge, and now you're telling me, oh, he's not judge, and he's now a loving Father? Okay, let's just do that. It's not that easy. In fact, there's a whole big discussion taking place right now among, kind of theological circles, is the construction of what we believe about God, and then a deconstruction, right? Which is torturous for a lot of people. Is you mean all that I learned from my parents, not all, but a lot of what I learned from my parents, a lot of what I learned in Sunday school, a lot of what I learned in youth group, that these thousands of trees rooted in my head, are you telling me to uproot that all and believe that God is simply a loving Father? He's not this brooding judge. He's a loving Father. You just can't make that switch like that. There's this deconstruction phase that oftentimes takes years, and it is just torment for a lot of people. I went through that. It took 4 years for me. I was in my young 20s, and I was raised with all this stuff. And it was a super clean, easy life for me. I'm telling you, it was much easier back then. Because here's the list of doctrines that are right, and here's the way to live that is right, and that's how the judge is satisfied, and he'll bless my life as a result, and now I can kind of manage everybody else's doctrine and everybody else's lifestyle, right? It was so easy and so clean. And then I came to this little bit of a faith crisis. I won't get into it. When that whole paradigm started to collapse, it didn't work. I just got to be a little sick of my own arrogance. I'm like, oh, who do you think you are to think you believe the right things about God and to think, you're kind of living the right way and you could point fingers at it. Who do you think you are, Treadway? And then there was a while there, I was in youth ministry, thankfully, just for a few years before my Grace Awakening, and I'm teaching this stuff now to the next generation. The same stuff that was taught to me, I'm teaching to the next generation, and I started feeling, this is so wrong, and I'm teaching this to the next generation. I'm teaching them to view God as judge. You're using little fear tactics, and you got to believe the right thing, and you got to do the right thing. If not, God is going to get you now, and he's going to get you forever, and you have scared little eyes looking at you. Because you're planting trees in their brains that will last a lifetime. And I got to thinking, this unsettled feeling, this isn't right. This isn't right. It took me 4 years. One of the things that really grabbed me was the most famous story, I think, that Jesus ever told. It's the story of the prodigal son. I'm not going to detail it. I'll just give you the big picture. The story of the prodigal son teaches that God, the Father, is not a judge, but a loving Father. He tells the story of a son, the youngest son, you may know it. He takes half of the family's wealth, goes off to a distant land, blows it on gambling and prostitutes. So if you were an ancient Jew hearing this story, it's a shame to your family in every way. You steal half the family's estate. You go to a foreign land and mingle with the foreigners. That was a no-no. You are gambling and you are squandering with prostitutes. A total shame to the family. And so Jesus is telling the story, and everybody listening to this story is thinking to themselves, get that younger son. That younger son must be judged. And I know they were thinking this, that younger son must be put to death because the law says if there's a disrespect, if you dishonor mother and father, you're to be taken outside the city and rocks will be thrown at your head until you're dead. That's what the law says. Jesus is telling the story of this son, shame to the family, squandering everything. The law says put the son to death. And so Jesus is telling the story and this crowd is enraged. That son must die. He disobeyed the law. The son must die. And here's what Jesus does. This prodigal son returns home to his father, and while he was still a long way off, the father saw him coming, filled with love and compassion. He ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. I love what Jesus does. He's a master communicator. He's telling this story, and the whole crowd's riled up. Kill that son. The son must be judged. Kill the son. They're thinking, kill the son, kill the son. The sun comes over the horizon, and what they're anticipating, because they have thousands of trees rooted in their brain that God is judge. What they're anticipating is seize the son, take him outside the city, and stone him until he is dead. So they're all riled up. Kill the son, kill the son. Sun comes over the horizon. And what's the punchline? The father runs to his son, filled with love and compassion, embraces him, and kisses him. And I am quite sure the crowd hearing this story was like, you've got to be kidding me. You have got to be kidding me, right? Because they considered themselves like the older son who did all the right things, obeyed all the laws, believed the right things, right? And so they deserve the place of honor. They're the right ones. They're with the judge, you know? And so get the younger son, kill the younger son. And Jesus says, no, the father loves the youngest son. The son said to him, Father, I've sinned against both heaven and you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. There's this reality that when we fail, we perceive a distance between us and God. I'm not worthy. And you can almost, kind of get this image where the father is trying to embrace his son, trying to kiss his son, and the son's like, no, I don't deserve it. I don't deserve it. So many people, so many Christians just are feeling guilt of the mistakes of the past, the sins of the past, and I'm not worthy to be in a relationship with you, judge, God, judge. And maybe I'll get my act together and maybe I'll, pray. Maybe I'll get my act together and maybe I'll feel close to you. So the father's trying to embrace his son. The son's like, no, I'm not worthy. The father said, this son of mine was lost, but now he is found, so let the party begin. Jesus is trying to unroot these thousands of trees that say God is vengeful judge, and he's trying to plant a seed. No, God is loving father, even if you have blown it, even if you have failed beyond any imagination. God is your loving Father. Then Jesus goes one step further. He uses this word later in his ministry, just once. He uses a word about the Father that is stunning. He reimagines God as Abba Father or Abba Pater. Pater is the Greek word for father. It's more the formal word for father. Abba is this Aramaic word that is a little less formal. It means dad. So pater is this Greek word that is, okay, you're the head of the household, right? God is not a gender, God is spirit. But this word father, pater, is the head, right? The head of the household. But then Jesus adds this word at the beginning, Abba, which is the Aramaic word for dad. It's this intimate word. And Jesus experienced the Father as dad in his most desperate moment in Mark 14. He's facing the cross and he says, Abba, Father, he cried, everything is possible for you. Please take this cup of suffering away from me, yet I want your will to be done, not mine. As Jesus was about to walk into intense suffering, he knows in that moment, his Father is not judge. His Father is dad. And he uses these words in desperation, Dad, would you be with me? Is there a deliverance here? And God essentially says, I'm going to walk with you through this struggle, but you will struggle. You will suffer. And he went to the cross. And because Jesus went to the cross, we have this assurance that God is not judge. A judge wouldn't lay down his life for us. Have you ever been before a judge? Some of you are like, yeah, I don't want to talk about it. Even for a traffic ticket, I caused an accident on my 21st birthday. That was a great day. I was not drunk. It was on my 21st birthday. I caused an accident, not a big deal, but I had to go before a judge. And I'm sitting there, and person after person is getting these penalties. I'm like, I'm not getting out of here alive. I mean, this bad day is just penalty after penalty after penalty. And it's my turn, and I got up there, gave a little explanation, and he laid down a penalty. And I'm like, all right, that's what I deserve, right? Some money, that was it. But a lot of people think that that's God. It's just you're before a judge. Was I good, was I bad? And there's a penalty. But God says, Jesus says, let's reimagine God. He's not a judge laying down penalties. He sees you and he runs to you just as you are, and he embraces you and he kisses you. And he says, let's have a party, let's celebrate. It's a whole different way of looking at God. And I'm telling you, most people can't handle it. Most people can't handle it. Those trees are just too rooted. And believe me, what took me 4 years cannot take one sermon. No way. But what I want us to do is to try to reimagine God with Jesus. If there's any of these thoughts of fear, if there's any of these thoughts of judgment, if there's any of these thoughts that you've got to get it right with your doctrine, you've got to get it right with your life in order to satisfy the judge, if there's any thought of that, any thought that you're separated from God because of your failures and sin, any thought that somehow God is disappointed with you because of the things that you've done, if there's any of these thoughts that God is judge, what I want to do through this communion is to understand God's grace over your life. God's grace over your life. The reason why Jesus gave his life for us is to show us how much he loves us. A judge doesn't give his life for the people that are standing before him, but a father would. And Jesus says, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And he would not stop trying to get people's minds to change about God. He wouldn't stop. He offended every religious leader who were like, no, it's about the law, it's about the law, it's about the law. And Jesus says, no, God is a father. We are his children and God is the Father. They were so offended by that, they put him to death. And Jesus says, if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. And he gave himself to the very end. John 13:1, Jesus knew his time had come for him to leave the world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he now showed them the full extent of his love. And the full extent of his love was in that upper room. First, he washed their feet as a sign of humility. If you have your communion cups, you can take these now. At the very top, there's some bread. During the communion, this Last Supper with Jesus, it was a celebration of the Passover, and there was bread, and they broke the bread. And Jesus says this bread is no longer about commemorating the time that Israel escaped slavery. This is a time that now commemorates your freedom. This is the time that you remember me. We remember Jesus. We remember his love for us. We remember this message where Jesus says God is not your judge. He is your loving heavenly Father. And that love is proved when Jesus laid his life down for us. So take this and eat this in remembrance of him. And then Jesus took the wine of the Passover meal, and he said, this no longer represents the lamb that was slain, and you ate that lamb at the Passover when God delivered you from Egypt. I'm now redefining this whole thing. When you take this cup during this Passover meal, you're taking it not to remember God delivering you from political slavery, but this is a new covenant by the loving sacrifice of God himself. Take this and remember Jesus who laid down his life for you. We're going to close in a song. The song is called Do It Again. We just celebrated the communion together 2,000 years ago where Jesus proves the full extent of his love for us. He proved it. He proved by his love, by his sacrifice, that God is not a vengeful judge. He is a loving heavenly Father. And Jesus gave his life for us to prove it. To the very end, he loved us. For those of you who might be trapped in this thought that God is a vengeful judge, you might be trapped in this thought as thousands of trees have been rooted in your brain, that God needs you obedient, God needs you right. That anything you do wrong separates you from God, that you might be under his judgment now or forever. If there's anything there, I want this song to be a promise to you. That as Jesus promises the love of the Heavenly Father upon you, that can happen even today. That can happen again. So let's stand as we close in this song.
walking around these walls, I thought by now they'd fall, but you have never failed me yet. Waiting for change to come, knowing the battle's won, for you have never failed me yet. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, your faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail me yet. Oh, you'll never fail. I know the night won't last. Your word will come to pass, and my heart will sing your praise again. Jesus, you're still innocent. Jesus, you're still enough. Keep me within your love, and my heart will sing your praise again. Your promise still stands. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, your faithfulness. Still in your
was amazing. That was incredible. Thank you guys. What an awesome morning just to be together. And let me just tell you something. If you want to see God do things again and again and again, come back again. Give your life to him again and again. Be here with us every Sunday. Get involved in a group. Serve our community. Be a part of advancing the cause of Christ with us together. And